Let's talk more about South Africa's relationship with Israel now. Bring in the University of Johannesburg's Politics and International Relations Department Assistant Lecturer Ndzalama Mathebula. A very good evening to you, ma'am. Good to have your time on News at Prime tonight. So how seriously do you think Tel Aviv will take the stance taken by South Africa, especially this decision now to recall South African diplomats and indeed the comments that the position of the Israeli ambassador to South Africa is now untenable?
Good evening, Tim Biggley. Thanks for having me on the show. So it is very much serious because taking action in the space of international relations actually shows that you are actually commanding many of the atrocities being caused by Israeli to Palestine. So I believe that it's very much serious because now we are taking action whereby we are recalling our ambassadors from Tel Aviv. Yeah.
And this decision to basically have the diplomats come back to South Africa, there had been a downgrade, of course, in South Africa's diplomatic presence in Tel Aviv. The decision now, they're saying, is to bring back these diplomats for a briefing, according to the International Relations Minister, on the situation in the Middle East currently. Do you think South Africa at this stage would go all the way? By that I mean sever all ties with Israel, even the trade relations, which we know have endured despite years of criticism of Israel and its handling of the people in Gaza?
Well, I do not believe so, but then I would like to state that only time will tell. But I do believe that our decision to actually rethink and reconfigure our cooperations with Israel will only depend on the escalation of the war itself. So it's all dependent on the escalation of the war itself, on how it will actually configure and shape our relations going forward, because I've known that we do not even have an embassy there. It's only a consular's office. So I do believe that with time and with the escalation of the war, there has been a deteriorative pattern between South Africa and Israeli relations in a bilateral setting.
Let me ask you a question that I asked of the Minister in the Presidency, Kumbuzan Chabeni, earlier in the program tonight, and that was a question around the decision, for example, to say that Israel is carrying out a genocide against Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank, yet still continuing a trade relationship, basically exchanging goods and money with the Israelis. Is that not hypocritical, given the seriousness of the charge that Pretoria is making against Tel Aviv?
It is, most definitely it is, but I do believe that at the same time they are trying as much as they can to separate economic corporations from what we would agree to be a human rights angle of decision making in the space of international relations. And I do believe that our history would play a large part on this because South Africa itself has once been an apartheid state. So I do believe that with the escalation of the war, since it has started since 1948, we do see that there hasn't been an end to the war, mostly because there's so many alliances actually ranged up in this war. So I do believe that only time will tell, but for now, I would say that the economic corporations do not necessarily outweigh, or we are trying to separate the economic corporations that we have with the country from the human rights atrocities, and trying to deal with that from a very foreign policy angle, leaving out the economic aspirations and objectives that we have with the country.
And this latest bombardment by Israel of the Gaza Strip has killed, we're hearing, around 10,000 people. The health ministry says many of those people are civilians, almost half, in fact, children. We've seen places such as the Jabalia refugee camp being targeted. The Israelis say that they were targeting Hamas figures there. Last week there was an attack on an ambulance outside one of the main hospitals. There too the Israelis claimed that they believe that Hamas operatives were using the ambulance. These attacks came, as we know, after Hamas launched an attack on Saturday, 7th of October, killing about 1,400 people. We're hearing the West in the main saying that Israel has a right to defend itself, but the Americans are talking more and more about the need to create, if you will, a humanitarian pause, yet they've not been able to convince Benjamin Netanyahu that that is the way to go. Why is it that his Western allies have not been able to, at the very least, soften his approach, even as these thousands of bodies are piling up?
Most definitely. So what you would find in an international setting is that a government will most likely ally with a bilateral government that has that will be beneficial to them. So what you find is, as much as the United States might say that they are for a good cause of a humanitarian cause, however, their support for Israel in their position outweighs that documented human cost that they have stated through a humanitarian angle. So what you find is governments tend to be very hypocritical because their practice and what they state is not necessarily the same. What you find is their agenda and their practices actually reflect their true agenda in the international space. And what we've known throughout history is that the USA, they believe so much in hard power, in coercion, to force and to use military force as a way of shaping their desired objectives or outcomes. So what you find is that might be just their foreign policy in the setting of Israel and Palestine, because I do believe another stance or another case is the fact that this Israel and Palestine might just be a proxy war between big powers globally. What you find, you can actually see it within the alliance that you find with Israel being supported by many of the Western countries and Palestine with the Eastern Tigers, the China and the Russia. So I do believe that it is some form of a proxy setting, and it might be hard to even resolve the war itself because people are already coming with biasness to choose sides. So then it can never be that we would have a mediative stance to say who is wrong, who is right, and how the war should be resolved going forward. So with the USA, we've seen that many of what they claim does not necessarily reflect their true agenda and action. So in a good cause and document, it's easy to say that they are for a human cause, but their actions usually reflect realism, hard power, and always wanting to shape outcomes in their own favor.
I wonder to what extent then you think what is going on now, the situation in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine has gone on for decades, the history of the occupation and the bouts of violence, because this is not the first time that we've seen the bombardment of the Gaza Strip, Hamas also launching strikes on the Israelis, etc., even though this is the worst on record. Does it offer an opportunity perhaps to rewrite, to change diplomacy and international relations?
Most definitely, most definitely. So what you find, especially not even in an international setting, but even in a policy or domestic setting, a policy is only changed by events. So most definitely this grants us an opportunity to actually rethink our diplomatic relations, our foreign policy, and how we should handle our bilateral relations with many of the countries, or even so having a convention or a document that can resolve wars, because it's not the first time that in history that we've had such a long war, So many of the wars have led to the separation of religion from politics, and I do believe that this would be a good opportunity to actually separate politics, political affiliations with religion, because what you find is that Islamic states or religion being very central to this Gaza and Palestine and Israeli war. So I do believe that it grants us an opportunity as an international community to rethink and try to understand what are the causes of war and try to obliterate all the other causes that might be to war and try to change policy that will actually foster a good, secure peace and secure setting for each and everyone. So most definitely it does grant us an opportunity.
Mathebula, really good to speak to you. Lecturer, assistant lecturer from the University of Johannesburg in the Politics and International Relations Department.